everyone, I'm Nina Gopal. Welcome to Global Express. This week, there are alarm bells ringing in the corridors of power in New Delhi after President Donald Trump, who had no compunctions about cutting off intelligence sharing and arms in aid to war-ravaged Ukraine facing the Russian army, has did just the opposite for India's arch-enemy Pakistan. While preparing to slap reciprocal tariffs on India from April 2nd, targeting tariffs on US autos and all kinds of other, metals and medical devices and agri products, Trump is loosening the purse strings for this nuclear narco state whose ties to China are stronger than ever. Trump has already cleared some $400 million for Pakistan to be able to maintain its F-16s. And praise for Pakistan's cooperation in handing over the ISIS Khorasan commander Sharifullah from Pakistan-Afghan border after a CIA tip-off was preceded by the $1 million in aid. Similar, many say, to what happened when Ayaman Al Zawahiri was eliminated. Now, Trump has lavished praise on Pakistan for arresting this 2021 Kabul airport bombing monster, but in London, the Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar was also bamboozled by a whole load of Kashmiri supporters from Pakistan, which must have rattled Delhi a lot, much more now. Now, Mohammad Sharifullah, who was allegedly involved in the planning of this deadly attack that killed 13 American service members and hundreds of Afghan civilians, will be extradited to the United States. But what are we talking about? Because I mean, this is this fair play where you're criticizing, India for its tariffs, but lavishing praise on Pakistan for arresting a terrorist, when we all know, and as India rightfully points out, that Pakistan's scorecard on keeping these terror havens alive has been nothing but it's been seen and heard and monitored by India. Anyway, this either way, what has Delhi achieved by cozying up to Trump? It's a notable shift in our policy. The Trump administration, as I said, authorizing $397 million for Pakistan to maintain its F-15s. But this position on security aid to Pakistan has seen, major reversals in the past. I mean, in 2018, during his first term, Trump halted military assistance to Pakistan. He cited inadequate counterterrorism efforts at that point in time. And the Biden administration, of course, later restored support, approving $450 million in September 2022 to sustain this very same fleet. But the quid pro quo, insiders are telling me, is a promise by Pakistan to bring Afghanistan back under its control, restore Bagram Air Base to the US, and given the fact that Pakistan's relationship with Afghanistan is not what it was, should India be concerned? I mean, this is our neighborhood. India is faced with multiple challenges. It's not just the breakdown of ties with Bangladesh, compounded by, powerful China's growing influence in the region. But Delhi seems to have put rebuilding ties with our problematic Western neighbor on hold, especially after the fact that the army chief of that time, General Bajwa, is supposed to have made a lot of concessions, which upset the Pakistan army. Now, the news is that General Asim Munir, the new army chief, is headed to Washington. And the newest civilian challenger to his diktat, the cricketer turned politician, Imran Khan, who's recently published an article in an international paper, has praised Donald Trump and is expecting Trump to step in again and do something on his behalf. But for India, where our common border faces almost daily attacks by the Pakistan army-backed terrorists, the ever-present danger is not limited to jihadist attacks alone. But this Hydra-headed monster of Pakistan, the narco-nuclear state, as our guests have called it, so many times, talking to us today on the treachery of the dangerous new jihad that Delhi is up against, are two veterans of the subject. Shan Bhatia is an Indian-born British journalist, writer, author, and war reporter based in London. He's reported from conflict zones from the Middle East, Afghanistan, and Sudan. He's a former diplomatic editor of The Observer. He's published several books based on his war reporting, a political biography of the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, called Goodbye Shahzadi, and another book called India's Nuclear Bomb, and more recently, Nuclear Rivals in the Middle East. Welcome, Mr. Shah Bhatia.
Thank you, Nina.
Also with us is Iqbal Chand Malhotra. He's an acclaimed author, documentary filmmaker, and television programmer who's traveled across Afghanistan extensively and China and Tibet. He's the author of the extremely well-researched book, The Bomb, the Bank, the Poppies, and the Mullah. But his new book, The Nukes, the Jihad, the Hawalas, and Crystal Meth, A Tale of Treachery, lifts the lid on how Pakistan's former President General Pervez Musharraf was the master puppeteer. It gives you the backstory of the Afghan meth trail and the role the ISI played in financing Pakistan nuclear bombs and nurturing Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden and other jihadi groups to destabilize Kashmir and Afghanistan. Welcome, Mr. Malhotra.
Nina, thank you. My pleasure.
So I'll start with you, Mr. Malhotra. From 1970 onwards, Pakistan used funds from heroin trafficking to fund its nuclear program, procuring technology from China, North Korea, and Europe. I mean, China played a huge role here. So what is the backstory on how Pakistan pursued its nuclear program right under the nose of the United States, and the roles played by successive army generals and Afghan warlords through the 80s and 90s?
Nina, the thing is that the story of Pakistan's nuclear program goes back to, I think it was December 16th, 1971, when there was that fateful surrender of the Pakistan army at Dhaka, and the state of Pakistan was broken into two parts for the first time after the partition of India, and you had a new country called Bangladesh that emerged. And the Pakistanis could not recover from this act, which was in fact orchestrated by Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And what happened is that 3 weeks later, in the city of Multan, Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who had taken over as president of Pakistan, held a conclave of Pakistani scientists, and he asked them and he exhorted them, in fact, to show that they had the metal to make the bomb. And that's
so you're basically saying it was Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto who, after the debacle losing East Pakistan in 1971, is the one who set the wheels of this nuclear weapon in motion.
And that is 3 years before India detonated her first nuclear bomb. And the fact is that India at that point of time in 71 was far ahead of Pakistan in the issue of nuclear technology. And we had almost been ready to make the bomb before the untimely death of the famous scientist and chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, Dr. Homi Bhabha, took place in 1967, when allegedly there was a bomb placed aboard the Air India plane in which he was flying to Geneva to attend a conference.
That's right.
So the Pakistanis had an existential issue because they felt that with Bangladesh having been sequestered from Pakistan, and for the fact that the Indian army was planning to enter into West Pakistan, and they were only stopped by the fear, or rather the warning given to them by the Russian ambassador in New Delhi at that time, I forget his name, that the Shah of Iran had also amassed 5 divisions of troops on the Balochistan West Pakistan border. Balochistan in West Pakistan and Iran border. And if the Indian army were to actually strike through towards the east bank of the Indus, the Shah would meet them on the west bank of the Indus, and that would be the end of Pakistan, West Pakistan. So, because at that point,
that is actually behind what said Zulfikar Ali Bhutto.
Yes, there was
that's very interesting.
And the fact of the matter is that at that point of time, the Pakistanis were faced with this very severe existential issue, and they decided to develop an independent nuclear deterrent. They didn't have the money to do so. And so Mr. Ghulam Ishaq Khan, who later on became the president of Pakistan, he went with Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto for a tour of friendly Arab countries, quote unquote, and they wanted to collect money to set up a bank that would then fund the nuclear program. And at that point of time, the Sheikh of Abu Dhabi, I think it was Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan,
Exile,
who became
yeah,
the first president of the newly formed UAE, which was formed in December 71,
correct.
he promised to give them the grand sum of $500,000 to as equity for the bank. But he also said that he would place hundreds of millions of dollars in this new bank, provided the Pakistanis gave him a preferential rate of interest, which was above the London Interbank borrowing rate at that time.
This was the
And he also,
BCCI, right?
yes,
This
the
was the
BCCI was
BCCI.
formed. I'm coming to that. And he also said that they could use the deposits that he placed with the bank as capital, or they could project them as capital of the bank to raise more money. So this venture started. And then 10 years down the road, what happened is that the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and the Americans needed to, attack the Soviet Union. They found an opportunity. There was the presidential advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski. So what happened is that Mr. Brzezinski felt that the jihad had to be started, and then Carter lost the elections to Reagan, and Reagan came in, and Reagan started under William Colby, who was the CIA director, this new jihad against the Soviet Union to bring it down. Now, in the course of this jihad, they had to use Pakistan because Pakistan was the frontline state which would supply weapons, and the BCCI bank that was formed to fund the Pakistan nuclear program was being now used to route funds to the Afghan jihad. And this, in this process, Pakistan became an indispensable asset for the US government, and the US government then gave them F-16s, and they also turned a blind eye to their nuclear program, and they didn't bother about nuclear proliferation because their main objective was to get the Russians down on their knees and for the Soviet Union to collapse, and they were successful
That's right.
ultimately in achieving that objective. So this
Yeah.
is the
Now,
backstory to the bomb.
if I can just bring in Mr. Bhatia, because you've tracked the Pakistan nuclear trail as well, and Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan coming in from, bringing in enriched uranium technology to persuade Zulfikar Ali Bhutto that he was the man for the job. That must have been quite something. But you also have the inside story on two things. One, on Homi Baba's very, very shocking death, and how Benazir Bhutto, smuggled all the inside technology that was needed through Pyongyang and back. So where would you like to start the story, Mr. Bhatia?
Nina, first of all, I've got very short windows. I think I explained to you.
I know. That's exactly why I'm asking you three questions all packed in one.
Right. So the first question about Benazir Bhutto, she asked me to go and visit her in Dubai in 2003 because she knew I was interested in the Pakistani nuclear program, and she and I had been friends from our Oxford days. Her brother was studying the Pakistani nuclear program when I was studying the Indian nuclear program, and we both had the same tutor at Oxford. She knew I was obsessed with it, and she said, "Come over and I'll tell you everything." So when I went to Dubai in 2003, she was living in exile, and she told me how she had smuggled uranium enrichment technology loaded onto computer disks, which she carried with her personally to Pyongyang. And in return, what Pakistan wanted from North Korea, was the Nodong missile, which was a reverse engineered Scud missile. And I asked her, how did you get that back to Pakistan? She said, very simple. We loaded one of their sample missiles under the wing of the Prime Minister's aircraft, and we flew back with that. They got our uranium technology, our uranium enrichment technology. We got their Nodong missile. So that was the story of how they exchanged vital information at that time.
But I mean, what intrigued me, even when you told me the story some years ago, and what you've written about, what exactly drove her to do something that must have gone against the grain on everything that she held dear? I mean, she was supping with the devil, the army, that even at that time was plotting and planning to assassinate her. Did she ever admit to you that it was a grave error of judgment, or did she have no choice at all? Because in 1988, she did come up with an assurance. I mean, she assured Washington that there was no bomb. and that even though they had all the components to put it together, there was no bomb. And that was called the Benazir Doctrine, if I remember.
But remember, in India, remember, she was terrified of the army. And the army used to keep her out of crucial decision making meetings. So she was doing her best to placate the high chiefs of the Pakistan army. And one way of doing that was to collaborate and cooperate with all their demands on the nuclear front. So you have to see this in the context of domestic Pakistani politics. She may have been a peacemaker at heart. She may have sought to build bridges with India, but she also had to deal with the devil of the Pakistani army. And that is what she was seeking to appease. And if the price of appeasing them meant helping with a fund or, further the nuclear effort, she was willing to do that. Her own survival depended on placating the Pakistani army.
That sounds like it. That does. But what about the other aspect of it, which is where she, not Benazir Bhutto alone, but where did Abdul Qadir Khan come up with the idea of how was he able to persuade the people like ZAB and Ghulam Shah Khan that he was the one who should be chosen over the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission? And tell us about Homi Bhabha, because that also was a shock to India. Why was he targeted? And was he targeted? Because it was a civilian aircraft.
Sure. If you want to start with Homi Bhabha, remember the information about his being targeted has come from ex-CIA people themselves. There's a man, I think, called William Crowley, who's written a book about how they planted the bomb. This is not the first time that the CIA has been involved in targeting Indian civilian aircraft. The Kashmir Princess, which was supposed to carry Prime Minister Zhou Enlai to Jakarta for the Non-Aligned Summit in Bandung in 1955, that was targeted by the CIA. They employed an agent from Taiwan to plant a bomb on the Kashmir Princess. It crashed off the Indonesian coast. That's established. That is beyond doubt. We don't know the full facts about what happened in Geneva in the aircraft that was carrying Homi Bhabha, but we do know that the Americans were determined to prevent more countries joining the nuclear club. And India, after China, was seen as the next most likely country to do that. Remember, the Americans are obsessed with power and keeping themselves number one on the world stage. Anyone who develops nuclear weapons threatens that status. And India was threatening that status, that predominance of American power. So if they had to kill a nuclear scientist like Homi Bhabha, they were prepared to do it.
So if I can go back to Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan and come back to you, Mr. Malhotra, what was the genesis? What was the genesis of this nuclear genius, really? He had a network in Belgium, he had a network in France and Germany. And, what pushed him into, sort of persuading the Pakistan government that he could build a nuclear deterrent, or was it the other way around? Did they find him or did he find the Pakistan government? Because Pakistan was also a very big beneficiary of the Cold War. I mean, both militarily and financially. As you rightly said, I mean, the U.S. backing of Pakistan since 1980 is legion. So, could you take us back to that time a little bit?
I think the important point to note is that Dr. A.Q. Khan was a Muhajir from India who went to Pakistan as a teenager, and he, I think, migrated there at the age of about 16, sometime in the 1950s. And he had to leave his homeland and go to a foreign country, an alien country. And so he was imbued with hatred for India. And he then qualified as a metallurgist, and he had a job with the Anglo-Dutch consortium called Urenco. And he had also married a Dutch South African lady, Hendrina Khan, who was his wife, and that gained him social access into the social circles of the scientists working at Urenco. And he was fired with the enthusiasm to build the bomb through the uranium enrichment route as opposed to the plutonium route, which was being espoused by the mainstream nuclear scientists at that point of time. And he wanted to seek revenge against India for having had virtually expelled him and his family, and they had to go in abject poverty to Pakistan. So he had a tough battle uphill task to actually convince Bhutto. And I believe the first time when he met Bhutto, he fell at Bhutto's feet and praised
Oh.
him and said that, my lord, you are the greatest in the world, and you're the only one who can make Pakistan into a nuclear power. Bhutto had him investigated by the ISI, and they tested him by seeing if he could steal some secrets from Urenco, which he did. And he established an incredible network of secrets, of stealing secrets, as well as sourcing the components required to build the centrifuges that then were to enrich the uranium with which to build the bomb. So he was not really a nuclear scientist, but he was a metallurgist, he was an ace spy, and he was an excellent manager who managed to not only source companies selling the components, but also provided them with the means and the incentives to dodge sanctions and to set up this whole enterprise in Kahuta. And the Pakistan government had named the laboratory there as the Dr. A.Q. Khan lab at Kahuta.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
right.
where their bomb emerged. So the hatred for India was actually what drove Khan. And he also was he also had a great ego, and he wanted to become a very famous man. And he wanted to establish a place for himself in the annals of Pakistan's history as the man who saved Pakistan.
Yeah, but
So,
he also, if I can come back to you, Mr. Bhatia, he also denied that he was behind the bomb until this interview, this incredible interview with India's best-known journalist, Kuldeep Nair, who was given access to DQ Khan. And it was written up, and it apparently was published in The Observer. You remember that time? Were you involved at all?
Yeah.
Could you tell us why Kuldeep Nair was given access at all to DQ Khan, and why it took a week before it was published?
Kuldeep was a great friend of mine, and we had done a
Yes,
piece
La Mentor.
in the Observer in 1979 or 1980, where the Observer
Yeah,
had asked me to spend 4 months investigating Khan. So we had
yeah,
done a story about Khan. And Kuldeep was a great friend of a man called Mushahid Hussain, who was the
yes,
editor of the Muslim. And Mushahid
yeah.
had invited him to his wedding. And Kuldeep rang me and
Mm,
he said, "Look, Mushahid has promised me access to AQ Khan. What shall I ask him?" So
oh
I
my
said,
God.
give me half an hour. I said, let me draw up 10 questions. And I drew up 10 questions. I sent them over to Kuldeep. And he had those questions in his pocket. And he trapped Khan into admitting that he had actually developed the atomic bomb. So Kuldeep
Wow.
emerged triumphant, called me from Islamabad. And he said, I've got it. I've got it. I've just had tea with AQ Khan. And I can tell you without any doubt that Pakistan has the atomic bomb. What shall I do? So I said, well, write it up.
This
And
was in 1979?
no, that was the original article was by the Observer, myself
1987.
and Colin Smith.
Uh-huh.
Kuldeep's article was 87,
Okay.
8 or 9 years later. But the
Mm.
reason he turned to me was because we were the first newspaper in the world to break the story of Pakistan acquiring nuclear weapons capability. So it was
Incredible.
obvious that, for Kuldeep anyway to ring me, as it so happened, we were friends, and he said, "Look, I'm going to see AQ Khan very soon. Can you tell me what questions to ask him?" Because Kuldeep was a political analyst, he didn't know
He
about
was.
nuclear weaponry, and
Yeah.
he didn't know what
But he was
questions
an,
to ask.
yes, yes,
Uh,
he's a wonderful gentleman. Absolutely fantastic.
I'll
Mr.
just
Malhotra, you
interrupt
want to
and
come
tell you.
in?
I'll just
Yeah,
interrupt and tell you that there's an
yeah.
interesting backstory as to why Mushahid Hussain rang up Kuldeep Nair, and that backstory pertains to the fact that there was an operation called Brass Tacks in
Hmm.
1987, whereby the Indian
Yes,
army
General
was
Sundarji.
mobilized and it went up to the Pakistan border. And General Zia was very worried that nobody was taking the oblique threats seriously that he was making, that Pakistan had the bomb, because he felt that under Mr. Arun Singh, who was then the Minister of State for Defense, and General Sundarji, the Indian armored thrust was going to cut Pakistan into two. So he told
Oh,
Mushahid Hussain to actually call Kuldeep Nair, and I also know Kuldeep Nair because his son is my best friend, and I've known him for about 60 years. And the interesting thing is that when Mr. Kuldeep Nair went to see Dr. A.Q. Khan, Dr. A.Q. Khan was a bit reticent about talking. And then Kuldeep Nair hit upon this fantastic opening gambit where he said that I just met Dr. Raja Ramanna, who is the chairman of the Indian Atomic Energy Commission. before I came here. And he said, why are you wasting your time going to Pakistan to talk to that fraud AQ Khan? He can't make a bomb. He can't even make a bloody firecracker. So this AQ Khan got so angry and he said, who the hell does Raja Ramanna think he is? He's an idiot. I am the one who's made the bomb. I am the first one who's enriched uranium and made the bomb in that route. And I will show you and take you there. And that was all put on tape, which then was sent to the Observer and to Sham. And that's how that article came out. And in fact, that article was telexed from my office to the Observer office in London. And at that point of time, the Intelligence Bureau had intercepted that message and they informed the Prime Minister of the day, Rajiv Gandhi. So when General Zia came to actually a few days later for the cricket match, he didn't know that Rajiv Gandhi knew that all of this had happened, and this was in process, and the article appeared a few days or weeks later after the Observer verified all the facts.
But remember,
what an
Nina,
incredible story.
As Iqbal rightly says, not only was AQ Khan man with a big ego, he's a very vulgar, rather nasty little man. When we published the first article about Pakistan's nuclear program, he protested by writing to the editor of the Observer, describing me as a, quote, Hindu bastard, unquote, who does not know the difference between the front hole of a donkey and the back hole of a donkey. Those are his words in a personal letter to the editor.
That is vulgar. Yeah.
He's horrible.
That's putting it lightly. Yeah. Mr. Malhotra, so if I can come back to you, do you have an insight into the role played by Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in Pakistan nuclear bomb saga? Because you say that he was uncomfortable with the funds from narcotics being used to fund it, and the embarrassment he faced when his foreign minister Sahibzada Yaqub Khan was confronted by the US. So Nawaz had been very reluctant, to even increase funding for the centrifuges that were being built by AQ Khan and the Pakistan Atomic Commission. Is that right? Was he kept in the loop by the army? Because the world suspected, but nobody knew for sure that Pakistan had a nuclear weapon. I mean, until, of course, AQ Khan went public and the Foreign Secretary, Shahryar Khan, is supposed to have told the Washington Post that Pakistan had one device.
Let's put it this way. Pakistan doesn't have an army. But the Pakistan army has a country called Pakistan, which is its colony. So it's the Pakistan army that controls Pakistan. And Nawaz Sharif was very, very scared that he would be deposed and jailed if he's made the slightest error in representing at what point Pakistan had the nuclear bomb and when they were going to detonate it or whatever. So he was scared for his own skin. And that's why he was reluctant to say anything and he wanted to go on denying everything. And the Americans caught Sahibzada Yaqub Khan on the wrong foot. And they knew that this was happening. But because of the fact that, what's his name, Nawaz Sharif was very embarrassed about it and they was reluctant to say anything. So he thought the best thing to do is to deny everything.
Sham, how much time do you have? Can you do you have another 5 minutes?
I've got 3 minutes. I've got 3 minutes, Nina.
Okay, so if I can just come back to you and you could just give us a rough idea of how dangerous you feel the current situation is, because the Afghan-Pakistan border is very porous. And there are jihadis who are, there are attacks by the Baloch Liberation Army. There are attacks by, the ISIS Khorasan, by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, all kinds of, groups that are operating freely on that border, and Pakistan's nukes, as Iqbal Malhotra has actually also written about quite extensively, are being trucked around, they're not actually in silos underground as they are in Iran. So how safe do you think they are at the moment?
Nina, I can't talk about the Afghan Mujahideen because I'm not up to date with them, but I do know that Pakistan has 170 nuclear warheads and they are being moved around the country on their rail network. Each nuclear warhead is 2.5 times the size of the Hiroshima bomb. And therefore, 170 nuclear bombs on India's western border is very, very dangerous. It's not that Pakistan will calculatedly destroy India with its nuclear weaponry, but the chances are of an accidental discharge of some kind of fanatic happening to be in charge of the switch that says go ahead and whack India, or misunderstanding India's intentions. The fact that you have 170 nuclear bombs at your disposal, which you can use to attack cities as far away as Chennai or Pondicherry or wherever, the
Port Blair,
southernmost tip of India,
even Port Blair,
even Port
And
the
Blair.
Port
Andaman.
Blair.
That is the danger. Yeah. So even the Andamans are at risk. And it's a very, very dangerous time. Internationally, it's very dangerous for India.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. So if I can just thank Shah. I really appreciate you joining us in this. I know you had very little time, but
Thank
very
you.
interesting all the same. Take care.
Thank you.
Mr. Malhotra, there was a very strong link with Iran as well in 1991. I mean, you both of you have brought up the Iran link. A.Q. Khan apparently supplied Iran with fully functioning centrifuges, and that was how Iran became a nuclear power. Is that correct? And Pakistan is said to have acted as an intermediary between China and Saudi Arabia too, for the sale of nuclear-capable long-range missiles. 36 of them is what I read, the Chinese CSS-2 missiles. So Pakistan also was proposing at that time, you say, to sell a nuclear bomb to Saudi Arabia for millions of dollars. So is that what led to General Zia-ul-Haq's assassination? Is it because he refused to play ball on Pakistan's nuclear bomb that he was removed?
Well, there is not really, I don't think that is actually very accurate, but it is reasonably accurate to say that the reason why General Zia was assassinated ostensibly by the CIA was that President Bush, George W. Bush Sr. at that time, was the fellow running the Afghan jihad against the Soviet Union. And he took over after this fellow called, I think, Ron Hinckley made that assassination attempt on President Reagan in 1982. So after that time, President Reagan was sort of incapacitated, and the entire security apparatus of the United States was under the command of Vice President Bush, because Vice President Bush had also been the CIA chief. And Bush had used the BCCI bank as a conduit to fund the Afghan jihad and also for various other activities. And before he became the nominee for the Republican Party for the 1988 presidential elections, he had to clean up his backstory. And the number one, you can say, pebble in that backstory was General Zia. And General Zia was assassinated, I think, a day or days before his plane was blown up, before the nomination for the Republican Party for the president's election of 1988. And the second person that George Bush had to eliminate was Noriega, President Noriega of Panama, because he was also involved with the CIA in a lot of activities in routing weapons and money to the Contras in Nicaragua. And there was also the issue of the BCCI bank, which had to be shut down, but it couldn't be shut down so fast because it was funding the Pakistan nuclear program and was funding the jihad against the Soviet Union. So there were all of these anomalies in the story that had to be removed from the scene. And that's what actually led to General Zia's assassination. And General Zia's assassination was pre-planned to the extent that the successive army chief at that time, I forget his name, he was of Indian origin. He was not a Punjabi. He was a Muhajir from India. And that gentleman was supposed to have boarded the plane, but he stayed back and he took a small turboprop and he flew to Islamabad, and he wanted to declare himself as president and chief martial law administrator. but
Yeah.
he was refrained or rather restrained from doing so by Mr. Pirzada, who was the topmost constitutional lawyer in Pakistan at that time, and
Correct.
who told him that, look, you better not do this because it won't be constitutionally appropriate. And Ghulam Ishaq Khan then became the
The president.
president of Pakistan. And this man became the chief of the army staff, General
Oh,
Beg, Aslam Beg. I think Mirza Aslam
General
Beg.
Aslam Beg. Yes, yes, of course. Yes, yes. Yeah. Oh, very interesting. But the CIA was involved with a whole load of other things. It also apparently came to know that China was going to test the first Pakistan bomb for Pakistan in back in 1990, and the US sent Robert Gates apparently to stop the Pakistanis from colluding with China. But the Chinese still went ahead in May 1990 and detonated Pakistan's first atomic bomb at Lucknow and Xinjiang. So, it's quite interesting. I mean, we have cooled our borders with China, but the fact is that now with the current situation in Pakistan being in such disarray on its borders, shouldn't we actually move a little faster to, in the current circumstances, see that our borders are a little bit, are basically monitored a lot more than they are at the moment.
Well, let me just tell you one thing, that even though the Chinese tested the Pakistan nuclear bomb in 1990, about 5 years before that, they did what's called a cold test to the bomb. And that was a simulated laboratory test. And they tested the efficacy of the uranium enriched nuclear weapon that was being developed by Dr. A.Q. Khan. And the
Which year
Chinese,
was that?
it was I think in around about 1984-85, around about that time.
Okay.
And that was a couple of years before Mr. Kuldeep Nair's interview with Dr. A.Q. Khan. Because how did he say that Pakistan had the nuclear weapon when the hot test took place after the interview? He said that on the basis of the results of the cold test. So that's the time when A.Q. Khan confirmed that the cold test, retrospectively confirmed that the cold test had taken place under Chinese cooperation. And the Chinese themselves gained the uranium enrichment technology from Dr. A.Q. Khan, because they didn't have it at that point of time. And in fact, in 1979, the Chinese really had no effective delivery system for their nuclear bomb. If they had to launch it, they had to push it over the Great Wall of China, because they had no missile or nothing that could actually carry it, carry a nuclear weapon successfully. So
So
they
are you
want.
saying that Pakistan colluded in a great way into making China the nuclear state, the power that
Yes,
it
the
became?
secrets that were stolen from Urenco were shared with the Chinese, and the Chinese then shared the secret of their missiles, their surface-to-air missiles that they had developed through North, and they routed the technology through North Korea to Pakistan, because at that point of time, the Chinese under Deng Xiaoping were making overtures to the West. There was this whole new spring. They were breaking away from their communist past, and they were interested in presenting themselves as very clean people. So the background trade was taking place in such a manner that the missiles were being routed through North Korea, and the enrichment was being routed directly to China. And American supplied C-130 aircraft were plying this trade. Now the issue about the Chinese today, that China and Pakistan today are even more and more closely integrated than they were 45 years ago in the late 70s, early 80s.
That
Because
is fantastic. That is really a very good assessment.
and the Chinese have now built two major dams on the Indus River in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, the Bunji Dam and the Diamond Basha Dam, which are in a position to start generating 40 gigawatt hours of electricity, supplying it to northern China, which is why they put this pressure on our borders in eastern Ladakh. They have no intention of withdrawing back. They, in fact, want to push forward, and we have no choice but to defend ourselves, and we have to defend ourselves vigorously. And this China trade that is creating $100 billion plus trade deficits for the last 3 years, and this year it will be even more than 100 billion. This China trade has to end, because it has destroyed our industry. Our industry has got deindustrialized. We're losing jobs. We cannot create new jobs because the industries coming under the categorization of metal manufacture and chemical engineering are suffering from too much Chinese competition. We need to do what Trump is doing in America, raise tariffs against on Chinese products to such a level that the Indian industry becomes competitive, because what we were producing in the 1980s and 1990s is now being bought from China because
That's right.
it's cheaper. But the fact of the matter is that we are facing unfair competition because of cheap Chinese labor. So if you raise the tariffs on Chinese imports and source them from other parts of the world instead for the interim, rebuild our industrial base.
Yeah, it's a very good point actually, because I've read a lot about that and the fact that we should go back to the 1990s. But can I also just go back to Pakistan? Because I mean, until Trump's arrival, Pakistan was in the doghouse. The US slapped sanctions on Pakistan's aerospace defense bodies, several companies, its long-range missile development, its delivery systems. So this Pakistan's nuclear program, I mean, the fact is that, it's been written about by all of you, by both of you extensively. Where does it actually stand? I mean, is it really a threat to India at this point in time? And you've said, I can't be seen. You've actually, all of you have talked about the number of bombs that Pakistan has, but are they in a position where they can be deployed and and can they actually unleash them on India?
Well, you see, that's a very interesting question, and I don't think that there's any simple answer. But you must understand that Pakistan today is buying the J-35 fighter aircraft, fifth generation fighter aircraft from China. It is also producing the Turkish fifth generation fighter aircraft, Khan. It's planning to produce it. So the Pakistanis are spending a lot of money on their weaponry, and they have spent a lot of money on the sorry, I've got a bad throat. I've spent a lot of money on the miniaturization of their nuclear weapons, and have developed tactical nuclear weapons with low yields, but enough to decimate up to a brigade of troops threatening or participating in a thrust across their borders. So the issue is that Pakistan has built a deterrence. Now, whether it wants to attack India, I don't think it is in its interest to attack India because of two reasons. Firstly, the fact is that
so it's not a nuclear danger to India.
It's a game of brinkmanship, nuclear brinkmanship. And the Pakistanis are also supported by the People's Liberation Army of China, the People's Liberation Army Air Force, and the People's Liberation Army Navy. So it's a symbiotic relationship that the Chinese and the Pakistanis have. And in fact, President Mao used to say that the Chinese and the Pakistanis are like the gums and the teeth in a person's mouth, because the teeth are supported by the gums. Now you can figure out who are the teeth and who are the gums. But Pakistan has given away Indian territory, which it captured in 1947-48 during the first Kashmir War to China, the Shaksgam Valley, which overlooked the Locknor nuclear testing site, and where there was a British nuclear monitoring station during the days of the Cold War. And the Chinese didn't want anyone to have eyes on Locknor at that point of time. So you see, the Pakistanis and the Chinese cannot be separated. They're entwined in an embrace, locked in an embrace, and they are going to remain in that embrace. And that is
Afghanistan, Mr. Malhotra, because one of the most interesting developments, especially your book, you've talked about crystal meth. There's a whole load of stories about how the Kandahar lobby is wiping out opium cultivation. But we all know that cultivation of poppy, there were methamphetamine factories, and Taliban did cash in big time in the past. So it was a narco state, and to a great extent, I mean, Pakistan is basically the route that is taken where this narcotics are brought into India and then smuggled into Europe through Iran. So, and they made tens of millions of dollars out of it. So, was this the ISI doing it then and unable to do so now, or how does it work?
Let's be very clear that notwithstanding all these press reports about the Taliban being at loggerheads with Pakistan, all of this is utter rubbish, in my
Really?
view. Let's be very clear that, like I said, that the Pakistan army has a country called Pakistan, which is its colony. And the Pakistan army has a second country called Afghanistan, which is also its colony. Now, Afghanistan is where the narcotics are grown and harvested and processed, which are then supplied by Directorate S of the Pakistan ISI to their partners in North America, the Sinaloa cartel, and the Russian mafia and other elements who distribute these narcotics in Europe. Now, the heroin is processed from opium in Afghanistan. The methamphetamine is processed from the ephedra vine, which is grown in Afghanistan. The fact of the matter is this, that the Pakistani ISI has not been paying the Afghan Talibans the right amount of money for all of this that's being done. And the fight is about the spoils of the drug trade.
Oh, I see.
I'll give you an example. The London School of Economics sent a team into Afghanistan, into the Farah province, which is the place where the ephedra vine grows wild. In the Farah province, there's a Bakwa market, which is the biggest wholesale market in the world for methamphetamine, for crystal meth. In 2019, the LSE team found that you could buy 1 metric ton of crystal methamphetamine in Bakwa, in Farah province in Afghanistan, for 320,000 US dollars per metric ton. And in North America, in say New York, the street price of this 1 metric ton was $40 million. So that's about 115, 120 times the cost of acquisition. Now, the Afghans say that, look, you are making 115%, 115 times profit on crystal meth, which is being shared between you, the retailer, and the Sinaloa cartel, who is the go-between or the interface between the pushers on the streets in North America and in Canada and other areas. And as you know, that President Trump has, and they also push fentanyl, which is again a very horrible drug. And President Trump has used fentanyl as an excuse to slap on the sanctions on the Chinese.
And also attack Mexico.
So the Chinese, the modern day Chinese triads, the Russian mafia, the Sinaloa cartel, and the whole philosophy of deviant globalization, which means the integration of international crime syndicates and narcotic syndicates, which was this theory was espoused by El Chapo Guzman, who was the leader of the Sinaloa cartel at one point of time. And he was incarcerated in the same federal penitentiary where 2 prominent Pakistani Afghans were incarcerated. There was a guy called Haji Bashir Nurzai, who was released only in 2022 in a prisoner exchange. And there was Haji Juma Khan. And these 2 kingpins collaborated. They got to know the Mexicans in that penitentiary, and the business then expanded and grew to the scale where it is today. Now, this business today is worth between 50 billion to 100 billion dollars a year, and it provides the off the books budget for the ISI and the Pakistani military to invest in expensive weaponry like the J-35 and the Turkish Khan fighter, because Pakistan doesn't generate the kind of foreign exchange that it needs to do that. I mean, it has very small foreign exchange reserves, hardly in single digits, I think 8 or 9 or $10 billion. and they are a basket case. Their economy is a basket case, but where's the money coming from? The
That's a
money
very
comes from
interesting
the
point,
narcotics
actually.
trade. The money comes
That's
from the
fantastic.
narcotics trade.
So
The
it's
money
basically it's narco-terror.
So they are the only state which is a narco state and has an independent nuclear deterrent. That independent
Yes.
nuclear deterrent provides them with the protection. Now you can say that they are brilliant at the job that they're doing,
Mm.
because they are so resourceful that when the country doesn't have the either the economy or the ability to generate an increase in GDP, increase in per capita income, they say we can generate money from this black market trade in narcotics, and this is what protects us from the threat of India or from the threat of the USA or from the threat of Israel. So you've got to hand them the fact that they are very capable and versatile people who have
Extremely
very
resourceful.
ingeniously and resourceful developed this and cocked a snoot at the rest of the world and say, to hell with you guys, we are what we are, and we are going to
That's
do
right.
this. So this is a very formidable threat. It's not only a threat for India, but it's a threat for the United States of America as well.
No,
And
but
this
that is
again,
what is the most intriguing of all, isn't it, Mr. Malhotra? Because the US is turning almost a blind eye to the nuclear weapons that you've said are not secure. Also, I mean, you've described how the Pakistan armies, moves the nuclear weapons in trucks, unmarked trucks, and
yeah, that's
I'd
what,
like.
in fact, Sham Bhatia alluded to the fact they were also moved around on the Pakistan rail network. You see, the Americans tried to take out the Pakistan nuclear arsenal.
Hmm,
Their JSOC, Joint Strategic Operations Command, carried out an exercise, but they were unsuccessful in doing it.
I see.
They could not eliminate the Pakistani nuclear arsenal in one go. The Americans have lost it in Pakistan. They have lost the race. They cannot influence the Pakistanis, and their main aim now is in some way to do a quid pro quo to supply them with this kind of software that is needed to upgrade their highly outdated 45-year-old F-16s. As I would say in my language, they're chakra F-16s,
Hmm.
so as to be able to get a trade off of some narcotic smuggler or something, because the epidemic of meth is enormous in America. I mean, the whole country is getting into an addiction, the youth of the country. So it's a serious issue. So how to
And the
tackle it?
fact
I don't think.
and the fact is that the ISI, Khorasan, and Al Qaeda could get their hands on a nuclear weapon.
You see,
I mean,
ISI, Khorasan, and Al Qaeda are all controlled by the ISI. You're not
okay,
ISI Khorasan, but IIS, Islamic State of Khorasan. The
yeah,
Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate S has each and every head of every non-state actor targeted. They follow them by satellite. They know, and drone. They know where the hell these guys are. And if they want, they can take them out at any point of time, because they are the children of Directorate S. Directorate S gave birth to them. So they control their growth and they keep them there because they are important, parameters in the game of geopolitics to tell the world that, look, they are there, we are here, we are a safe bet. Those guys are loose cannons, and we're the only people who can get to them. So they are what are called sleeper agents of the Pakistan state, of the
mm,
ISI, to be activated as and when needed, to adopt a posture that suits the geopolitics of the region. Either they will make pro-Pakistan noises or anti-Pakistan noises, and the Pakistanis will say, we are beleaguered, we are under attack from the Taliban. Arey bhai, the Taliban were created by you guys.
that's
President
so
Musharraf
true.
created them.
Yeah.
So what are
In
we
fact, to
talking
go,
about?
in fact, to get to President Musharraf, when he was president and he backed setting up the Kahuta research laboratories, Pakistan is supposed to have had 1,000 dirty bombs. So, what is the current situation? I mean, what kind of dirty bombs do they have now? What are the numbers? Are these nuclear weapons in safe hands?
It's very difficult to get into a number crunching game, And I don't think whether the Pakistanis have a
And
thousand.
also one more, if I could just interrupt, India being playing holier than thou with this no first use doctrine. I mean, what's the point of that? Because if the bombs fall into the wrong hands, then then it could all just blow up in one great big ball.
Let's be very clear about two things. Firstly, the fallout from a Pakistani nuclear weapon detonated on Indian soil is also going to affect the Pakistanis. The wind will either blow it towards Pakistan, or the wind will blow it towards Bangladesh, or the wind will blow it towards Tibet. So it's not going to provide the Pakistanis with any succor that they were going to detonate a bomb in India. Secondly, whether you have 1,000 dirty bombs, or you have 100 dirty bombs, or you have 50 dirty bombs, the fact that even 50 dirty bombs are there, they are more than and much easier to control than 1,000 dirty bombs. So I don't want to get into this number crunching game. But
Okay.
the point is that also the history of Islam in the Indian subcontinent, all the historical monuments and all the buildings and the remnants of the Mughal Empire, and before that of the slave dynasty and all of that, all of those are in India. They're not in Pakistan. So my point is very simple. You want to nuke India, you'll wipe out all your history. In any case, you have no history because your history starts in 1947.
That's true.
Because you don't want to deny the fact that before you became Muslims, you were Hindus or you were Buddhists. As the Afghans were also, they were Buddhists. They then became, in the 12th century, 11th century, they were converted into Islam. So the point is that there's a tremendous amount of contradictions and paradoxes in this whole geopolitical story. Let's boil it down to a simple fact. The biggest threat to the subcontinent is from China. China has already subjugated Pakistan. It is destroying Indian industry. If we do not watch out, in 5 years, we'll be completely crippled industrially. The Americans are threatening to put sanctions and tariffs on the service exports that
Semiconductor.
we make.
Yeah.
There are three sectors in the economy. There's agriculture, there's services, and there's industry. Industry is being wiped out by too much competition from China. Services are under threat of reciprocal tariffs from America. What's left is the agriculture industry. Agriculture industry is under threat from the Indian corporate sector and the government of India, who doesn't realize that this is the biggest resource that we have today. We should provide employment and the ability to export food for the entire world. So first and foremost, we have to get our house in order. We have to get our perspectives in order. We have to have our vision of what we want, where we want to go, and how do we want to play this geopolitical game. These are all sensational stories, that keep on getting released all the time. But the true masters of the game know what's going on, and they need the ability to plan not just 3 years ahead or 5 years ahead, but 15 years ahead of how we are going to be able to get on top of the game. At this point
your
of time,
book, Mr. Malhotra, your book about the nukes, the jihad, the Hawala, and the crystal meth is actually leading up to the point where the real danger is not just Pakistan, which is subservient to China, plays China's game, but China itself, which is what we should be looking out for and what the US should be looking out for.
I agree with you. I've got a bad throat talking about China because nobody seems to want to listen. And the lure of cheap Chinese products has converted Indian industrialists into exporters, traders, mercantilists. They evolved from mercantilists and traders into industrialists, and they've gone back now to becoming mercantilists and in traders. That's the tragedy of this country. People are looking at short-term profit, short-term gains. Nobody thinks about the national interest. What is India's national interest? India's national interest is to become a strong economy with a high per capita income, with a strong and enduring industrial base, with a robust agricultural sector that can generate the surpluses for industry to grow. You look at the FMCG companies today, they have projected growth rates of 1% and 2%. And the government is always haggling figures, trying to show that growth ho raha hai, growth ho raha hai. Question is, that unless you have growth in employment and unless you have growth in consumption, how will you have growth in GDP? It's a basic
That's
primer of
true.
economics. People have to
Absolutely.
consume, and they can only consume when they buy more. And they can only buy more when the prices fall. So, I mean, you have to first look at the economic matrix, then look at the political matrix, then look at the defense matrix, and develop an integrated strategy towards this. But undeniably, the number one threat faced by India today is China. It's a political threat, it's an economic threat, it's a military threat.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Iqbal Chand Malhotra, for taking us to the point where we have to realize that China is a ticking bomb, no, not so much Pakistan. Thank you, Mr. Shan Bhatia, as well, for joining the program, for giving us a rare peek into Pakistan's quiet nuclearization that, unlike Iran, doesn't seem to be on Washington and the new Trump administration's radar. Thank you, viewers, for watching Global Express. Please do click on the New Indian Express and share.